wanted to talk about wealth today. I'm a very wealthy man. I'm a very wealthy man. I have 3 children. I have 6 grandchildren. I'm very wealthy. I have my health. I am very wealthy. I own this whole territory. I drove for 3 days. That's why I look a little tired. I drove from what they call Nova Scotia to New Brunswick to northern Maine, down to New Hampshire, back in through Quebec, back over to New Brunswick, and back into Quebec, Mi'kmaq territory. Been driving for 3 days. That's how wealthy I am to travel through our territory. I do not look at our territory as Indian reservations. I am not an Indian act. I'm not an act. Nina Mi'kmaq. And I'm proud of that. Proud of the fact that my parents gave me the skills that I have. I can go out and I can trap on my land. I can hunt on my land. That's the way I survived. And I was very good at it, as you can see by the girth of my body. And we can fish. And it don't need to be called anything other than our rights, our inherent rights. That's where we get our power from. I'm wealthy because I've worked in 235 First Nations communities across the country, including the United States and Canada. I'm wealthy because I've trained thousands of people, Indigenous people, Aboriginal people, in justice and policing, corrections, fisheries, warriors. Burnt Church, I was there. Indian Brook Wars, I was there. Statliam Nation Wars, I was there. Gitsan-Wet'suwet'en, Delgamuukw Wars, I was there. Niska Wars, I was there. Stola Wars, I was there. I trained all the people with the masks on, man. I told them, we're taking the masks off. If I'm training you, you don't need to cover your face. That's the way I made the warriors work. I trained your tribal police here. I trained your rangers here. And I'm proud of them. Very, very proud of them. So I am a wealthy man. And what is wealth? Wealth is in your heart. It's in your mind. Comes from there. Makes us feel proud of who we are. I got a little bit of white in me, but I can't prove it. So I got to be a goddamn poor Indian all my life. We need, and I know you're excited about things to come. And the little bit of monies that you got coming towards you shows you how valuable your nation is. In Nova Scotia alone, just in the private property, is worth over $100 billion in tax. $100 billion in Nova Scotia. You know, New Brunswick's going to be about $200 billion. And of course, Quebec is going to be about $300 billion. We're looking at $500 billion just in taxable private companies, private property owners. 1% of that, you'd be rich. This community would have enormous amounts of money, right? 10% of that, $50 billion. It's amazing when you think about the monies that your land is worth. So when people are saying, Donald Marshall, I was the chief investigator on the Donald Marshall inquiry. I'm the man that cleared his name. Okay, really, I was the man. When they asked Gullilan, Donald Marshall's mother, after 17 years of this trial, after 17 years of the inquiry, and we're on camera, and I wasn't there, I was out west training. They called me, CBC called me. They said she made one comment. What do you have to say, Mrs. Marshall, after 17 years? And she said in broken English, I can only say one thing. I want to thank Jim Maloney for saving my boy, because nobody else would believe in it. For 17 years, and still today, people still think that Donald Marshall is guilty. Even though 3 days on the investigation, I had the tape and the video, and the man demonstrated in a video how he had stabbed Sandy Seal, killed Sandy Seal, and stabbed Donald Marshall. And this man had a lengthy record. But they would still believe that a 17-year-old boy could have done this, and not this dirty old man that had a criminal record would do it. And there are people to this day still believe that. We talk about the fishing. We talk about the wealth of the fishery. Not every Mi'kmaq is making a moderate livelihood in fishery. What is a moderate livelihood? Along the coast here, along the Atlantic coast, 11,000 fishing licenses. And they're individually owned, remember now. Individually owned. 11,000 wealthy people owning fishing licenses, owning their boats, owning traps. We as a nation, in Listowitz here, you might have 12 lobster licenses. Believe me, you're not wealthy. I can go across here in Campbellton, and I know the Royal Bank is not here, but I can go across the street to Campbellton and not be served by a Mi'kmaq person in that bank. Why do I know this? Because that's the case in most. That would be very odd if that was the case. I can go over there and see if I can get served at McDonald's, at Tim Hortons, by a Mi'kmaq-speaking person. Probably not going to happen. I know it's not going to happen next to Eskasoni or next to Indian Brook. We talk about Millbrook Nation, and we talk about Membertou Nation doing quite well in the gambling and the gaming aspect of it. But our lands are not expanding. We are expanding, but the reservation is still the same size as it was, even though we've doubled and tripled our population. So we got to think outside the box. We got to think as a nation. We got to think as our rights that we own this territory. There is no borders. The man talks about my fence is here, and I'm painting my fence, and I'm fixing my gate. My fence is the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and the Gulf of Mexico. Those are my fences. That's the way I got to think. I do not think that I'm an act, that my power and my status comes from an Indian act. That don't run in my mind. It doesn't run in my body. It doesn't run in my blood. Jean de Baptiste Cope was my relative. My mother's maiden name is Cope. Jean de Baptiste Cope would walk through our territory for 3 months, come all the way up to the Miramichi, all the way up to St. John River, all the way down into Penobscot territory. Jean de Baptiste Cope. Jean de Baptiste Cope signed a treaty in 1752. Documented, killed over 73 people in his wars. That's what the numbers that they found. He was a warrior chief. And he put the government and the British government into submission and made them want to sign the treaties, even though they put bounties on their heads. As Dr. Paul was talking about. But Cornwallis left here with his tail between his legs because he could not accomplish what he did in Scotland. In Scotland, the British took the Scottish, yes, and they cleared the land and killed the Scottish people so they could have land to graze their sheep. And they brought him over here as the expert. Cornwallis was the expert. He grew up with King George. He was the expert, the buddy. Okay, you go to New Scotland. You take over there. And of course, what does he do? He does what he does in Scotland. Puts a bounty and is going to kill all the Mi'kmaq. Well, Cornwallis was so terrified of the Mi'kmaq and the other people that they wouldn't even venture out of their compound to get firewood. Because there's Indians out there. There's Mi'kmaq out there. He accomplished nothing with that bounty, and he left here broken. He did not do what he was supposed to do because our people were so powerful and so strong. And we still have that today. We still have that passion. We still have that power. Samaganess. We're still that warrior mind. No matter how hard they tried to erase that 12, 13, 14,000 years of us being documented in our territory, and it's probably twice that, probably 25 to 30,000 years. Adam and Eve were just not even thought of at that time. Adam and Eve are new kids on the block. Really, really. So, and of course, when Noah's Ark was flooding, we were high and dry here. But the reality is that our people here are so strong, and we stayed together, and we had the trust that we talked about today. And our wealth is in who we are, and in our territory, and in our family, and in our land. That's our wealth. Our relationship to the land is our wealth. That's what you got to remember. That is not for sale. That cannot be for sale. There is no money in this world that can buy that. They are saying that the government of Canada has over $2 trillion of our monies in their banks for the use and sale of our lands. $2 trillion. The interest on that alone would fund a war. And actually, it's probably where the money's going. When Stephen Harper, and they had the Kelowna Accord, they said there was $5 billion for Aboriginal people in housing. Stephen Harper came in and said, no, we're not going to do that. Then the residential school thing came on. Where did that $5 billion come from? And from here to there. It's all planned. It's all planned. So don't, the fact that and I see that people are saying, well, we don't trust, and right. Why would we trust? Why would we trust? You're going to take your money, what you get, and you spend it at your discretion. It's about time. That's just like winning a big bingo game. Right? My sister won, there you go. My sister won $20,000 playing bingo. That's it. That's the best dream that a bingo player could get. $20,000. My sister Ruby. She's a champion bingo player, right? She's the 10th degree black belt bingo player. She won $20,000. If anybody in their lifetime could win that, and you're going to be getting that kind of monies, and I congratulate you, but you've already got your wealth. You already got your language. You've already got your extended family. You've already got your ownership of your territory. Right? You need to understand that. You cannot operate from the Indian Act on this little piece of land. You need to think outside of that. Allow your mind to be outside of that. I sat one day and we talked about the Queen coming to Halifax. And I was head of security. I trained the Pope's bodyguards, the native bodyguards, the Commonwealth, all that crazy stuff. So I'm in charge of security. And I see the jets going overhead. I hear the container ships coming in, the trains coming in. The Queen is coming. They say, the Queen is tough. It's raining, but she'll just put on the boots and her rubber boots, and she'll come out. Doesn't matter if it's muddy or not, she'll come. So sure enough, all the dignitaries are there, all the chiefs, and everybody's there. 400-year celebration. The Queen comes into the park, What do we got to see? We're standing in the shadow of a 10-story building, towns around us, everything else around us, RCMP in their red serge, everybody dressed up. What are we doing? We're making baskets in a goddamn teepee. 400 years. We're still doing the same thing that we did 400 years ago. And they're all right with that. The Queen is all right with that. The Premier's all right with that. The government's all right with that. Our Christian friends are all right with that. How can that be? How can that be? Why do I have to be an Indian Christian? Why can't I just be a Christian if I'm going to be a Christian? Why do I have to be buried in an Indian grave and not in a white man's grave? Even when I die, I'm prejudiced against. I do not understand why the Aglasio hates us the way they hate us. I've traveled around the world. I cannot understand it. I cannot understand it. But there's that racism there that we just cannot get around. And at our age, meaning if you're 50 and above, you're not going to see any difference. You're not going to see any difference. We're going to go on being poor, being the way we are, being wards of the government, being told we're wards of the government. That's their thinking. You need to think outside of that. You need to get that off to your grandkids. That's what you need to think. And you will remember, not too long ago, not to expect very many smiling faces. You didn't get very many smiling faces from Indian Affairs. You didn't get very many smiling faces. Oh, yeah, how you doing from the RCMP? Great to see you today. You didn't get no smiling faces. I'm talking 15, 20 years. There were no smiling faces. And when you get your reward and you get your little bit of money, be careful of those smiling faces, because you remember when those people didn't smile. You remember when you couldn't go into that bank and get a loan. You remember when you couldn't buy that car, and you remember when you couldn't get groceries on credit. Remember that. So you be very, very careful about the smiling faces that are going to be coming here when they hear that you got a little bit of money in your nation. They weren't here last year. They weren't here the year before. Just remember that. That's my final warning to you. Maloney.